the chairman, knowing that these so-called mistruths are being bantered about, can
But you have to come
document the truth.
forward with, you have to come forward, the accuser has to come forward with documentation.
Okay,
So, and
whatever.
the other thing I think you have to think about is, who would want to come and work in Torrington under these premises of how this process is gonna be? No one is gonna take a chance that all these people are gonna keep their mouths quiet.
Right.
I mean, in a perfect world, it would, but.
What does concern me, and it's upsetting that the board's attorney says that we can't see the applicants other than the one who's finally picked, is I, as a board member, would like to know what type of applicant pool we're getting for all our positions.
Be part of the interview.
Yeah, the interview committee.
Wait, but if I understand this correctly, on a certified position, we're not allowed to be part of the interview process. You said that that was statutorily the administration's responsibility?
Ultimately, the administration makes recommendations to the board. It doesn't mean that you couldn't design a process that had some involvement of board members on a search committee or interview committee.
For every position?
Theoretically, yes, but again, I think we need to go back and really look at what you are doing currently, your search procedures. Address it in the context of FOI issues, and make sure you're in full compliance with FOI and ensure that steps going forward are in full compliance with the FOI process. You're not foreclosed from having board members. There are districts that have board members involved as part of interview committees for certified, in some cases, even non-certified positions. That's less common. Ultimately, though, it's the Board of Education in those districts that makes the final appointment.
Right, so this is a two-part, I guess, opinion question. Do we have a consensus that having all of the affiliated positions, however they get to the consent agenda, passed through the consent agenda as our form of a vote to approve or not approve those positions?
Yes. Yeah.
Do we have a consensus of people that want to look into expanding the availability of documentation prior either to the vote or to the consent agenda being created? Do we have a consensus for that?
When they're not involved in a search committee.
No, this is just once a final candidate is selected, again, prior to being on the consent agenda or after, that's a discussion that can have if there's an interest in going forward, because right now we're just all spinning our wheels. Is there a consensus to move forward and investigate that type of documentation?
My feeling is either be on the interview committee
Right,
or don't.
right.
Right.
I won't,
Right. That's it.
I don't want access before that. I want to know that when I'm voting on someone as an appointment that's going to be our employee acting together, that we assume the liability for, that if I have any questions, there's something readily available that I can go and look at.
Well,
That's
if
it.
we had that information in executive session, when we were going to vote on this candidate, would that serve your purpose?
No.
No, because we don't want to go into.
I don't, yeah, exactly. I just want to be able to go, look, if there's any question, look at the documents that are for the candidate going forward, and then just keep it on the consent agenda. I just,
Dan?
It sounds sort of like we're going round robin here about what we're trying to get to. What does the board as a whole think if on Friday when we get the appointments or whatever for the consent agenda with the board package, the names are public at that point? Because they are on the consent agenda.
No, there's no
They're
name
not.
on
The
it.
names.
No,
That's the thing that
And-
really bothers me is the names
They
being available,
they
being
currently
protected.
Yeah, they
are
are.
on the
I was
consent
gonna say.
agenda. When the
Yeah, when the-
agenda is sent out, the
Yeah.
consent agenda is complete with names and
Names,
position.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It
that's,
is on it.
yeah.
Go ahead, finish your statement.
So when the consent agenda comes out, as the names are on the consent agenda, we already have that information's public. We could set up a secured site that we can log into that is viewed in Flash, so nobody can print it, nobody can do print screen, nobody can get the information. But the 10 board members could log into a website via their iPads or whatever, look through the resumes of the people that are on the consent agenda. So if they have questions, they have till Friday to Wednesday to see it. After Wednesday, that website comes down. So that way there you have a finite period, you have several days, nobody has to come down to central office. But if they have questions,
But
they
This
can
just-
Who
solve
manages
the
that
answer.
website though?
No, wait. This just goes to, does this board, which is
Yes.
the question, have an interest in moving this discussion
Correct, but this
forward?
puts it in a
He's
scope.
providing
A scope.
how that could work.
But it could be, we've talked,
Everybody-
it could work on any
Yeah.
myriad of ways. Do you want to see the information or not see the
Are we
information?
voting on this or what?
No, we can't vote, we're just making a consensus.
No, I
And I
think
need
we,
clarity,
I
so-
agree with Chris. You want to know the information, be on the interview committee. And I also think we hire a superintendent for a reason. And I trust the superintendent to bring forth the best candidates, period.
Hang on a second,
I
our
agree.
attorney's having an aneurysm.
No, just. Not yet. Something wrong already.
Superintendent
He is having a mild seizure.
No, just, I'm just trying to get clarification. Right now, is the name of the finalist to be recommended by the superintendent, does the name currently appear on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Not that it did.
Yes.
But not,
Yes.
but I have not put, administrators, like we just hired an elementary principal. But I did, because I wasn't sure, are we gonna go into closed, executive session, or is it gonna be out in the open? And so I brought something to hand out that night. I mean, I need the procedure.
To answer your question, the names are on the consent agenda.
For
For all
teachers and,
We
you
have
name
had-
it.
Not administrator?
We have had administrators on the consent agenda.
Yes.
But now they're
Yeah.
already working before they arrive
Just-
on.
Yeah, because by time,
All right, anyway.
we have a
As
meeting.
the
Go ahead.
superintendent indicated earlier, the risk of that, if you put the name on the consent agenda and then ultimately the person, for whatever reason, is not appointed by the Board of Education, then you have potentially harmed that individual in terms of their
Correct.
current employment. And that could hurt the district, ultimately, in terms of loss of one or more
Okay.
candidates who would say, I can't put myself in that position of having my name be out there. Another approach is again, would be to discuss who the finalist is in executive session, subject to that person's right to have it be an open session. Have whatever discussion occurs regarding that candidate in executive session, and then ultimately there'd be a motion to appoint that person out in public session. But there is a risk.
There
Having
are
the name-
consent agendas that have 60 to 70 names on them.
Okay. Well, and I don't mean to complicate what I realize is already complicated.
Well, you have to hire your paras every year. So
Right.
your paras, based on student need, you have a list of,
Correct, but
you need 20 paras.
As a board, you could distinguish, and maybe this is really where Cheryl was going just a few minutes ago, you could distinguish if you're gonna reappoint paraprofessionals, for example, every year, so that it isn't necessarily a huge deal to put their names on the consent agenda, they're already here. That's different from where you're doing a search for a principal's position, where I may be a sitting principal somewhere else, and I may not want my superintendent to know that I'm looking for a job. So you might, again, I know you've already got lots of layers to this conversation, but you might want to consider having a different process with regard to the level of position you're talking about, which means no disrespect to any level, but
No, right.
the reality is they're different.
But still, we could have a process that we consent to the position.
The position
No,
of the
'cause-
person.
How
No.
do you consent to the
We-
position not knowing who it is?
How can they Google the name?
We hire
When the
human beings.
superintendent brings the positions forward, say it's an administrator, a central office person, 10 teachers, 15 paras, and a janitor. We can approve the position of.
Position's already approved and created.
Because it's in the budget.
Right.
The position exists, it's just the
Yes.
appointment.
You need a third grade math teacher, or you need a third grade
Right,
teacher
so
in
when
elementary
we-
school. You're not approving a position, you have a void.
But when we
and you need a person.
consent,
To a
you're saying the
person.
name can't be on the consent agenda.
He's saying you shouldn't put it out on Friday for a meeting on Wednesday exposing this person to damage, that you should put it out at the meeting.
I think, let me just, maybe this will be helpful. If you step back and distinguish between appointments that may be viewed as a little more routine, for example, reappointment of employees every year, relatively routine, makes good sense, consent agenda, probably the best way to handle it. Those names, you're not really disclosing anything confidential, those are reappointments that happen every year in most cases. That's distinguished from, you're gonna fill a principalship, and Jessica and I are a couple of the finalists, maybe you have a few more. Cheryl makes her final recommendation that Jessica's gonna be the person that she's gonna recommend to the board. Cheryl puts her name on the agenda. For whatever reason, the board ultimately decides, no, actually, that's not, we don't support that recommendation. Jessica's now got issues with her current employer potentially, who has no idea that she was out looking for a job. So I think in thinking about this, I think it may be really helpful for all of you to think about different positions within your district. Because you probably have some appointments that are, I don't mean this to be a negative term, but more routine than others. And you have others that are specialized, and you have outside applicants whose jobs may be in jeopardy, not jobs, but whose status may be in jeopardy in other places of employment if their name gets out prematurely. If they get appointed, it all works out perfectly, but if they don't, it may not be so pretty.
And then that's why it becomes difficult to bring two finalists forward.
Correct.
We're not asking you.
No,
We don't
but
want
maybe
to.
Can we
Okay,
just do it in
so
an
for-
executive session?
Yeah, in a situation like that, I think that would make
Yes.
sense, right? We would discuss those too.
But also, if you were saying bargaining units, technically, your administration or
Right.
bargaining, so.
Right.
The other piece too is, it takes us already long enough to go through the hiring process. By time the members of the interview committee vet through whatever applications, number of applications we have, it would be a very short turnaround from when I make my decision of who I want to bring forward. And, I can't wait a month for a board meeting.
But in policy, if we created a telecommunications policy, we could have a virtual meeting at any time.
You can't vote on stuff.
Can't vote on stuff in a virtual meeting?
And we can't, as any,
City council does it all the time. They do
Connection
telephone
does
meetings.
it.
Virtual meeting?
You mean
You can have a meeting by conference call or video.
Yeah.
conference call, but not, here's a email or whatever you
No, no, no,
set up and
no.
check.
But you can have, for example, a video conference.
A
meeting.
video
video.
conference or
Yeah.
a
Right.
A virtual,
meeting.
okay, I'm thinking, I thought, never mind, because we've done votes for other nonprofits and we can't vote, you can't vote. Can't
In
vote.
Torrington, they do it at city council routine.
But, okay, so the other side could be that
Excuse me.
we decide that the superintendent does all the hiring. And that, would we still have to, we don't even consent. The superintendent does, wait a minute.
I don't say that's
The
an option.
superintendent, that's an option, the superintendent does the hiring, and then any that we feel weren't the right person for that position, it would be on the superintendent's evaluation.
Ultimately, the board has the right to determine whether it needs to appoint, I'm gonna distinguish between non-certified and certified. You can decide whether you as a board want to delegate that authority to the superintendent. I think we've mentioned before, some districts draw the line at certain administrative positions, and they say positions of, principal, building level administrator and above, or district-wide administrator must be appointed by the board. All other certified positions, which would include teachers, would be appointed by the superintendent, and non-certified would be appointed by the superintendent. That's what some boards do. You're not bound to do that. But it just gives you a sense of there is latitude here that you have within the statutes ultimately.
But we can also decide that all hiring, any level, goes through the superintendent.
You could, yes.
That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
yeah.
That's an
absolutely.
option.
Yes, you could.
I think we need to decide that first.
What's that?
At what level?
Well, the whole
I
point to
thought-
this conversation is, what do we want to be responsible for hiring? That's where we started. And we
Mhm.
started with, currently, we approve all hirings that pass through the consent agenda. And that seemed to be the general consensus, except the non-affiliated positions, that those would be viewed as they currently, in detail, whether it's through contract or through agreement, work agreement. We hadn't gotten to that yet. But we're stuck on the consent agenda part of whether we still feel that all positions should be consent agenda, or do we want to delineate bargaining units? Do we want to I mean, where do you want to draw the line? Do you want to draw a line?
I thought we had some consensus already that the majority of the board was in favor of retaining the consent agenda as in existence.
But then it got really muddy.
Right.
Well,
Got really
how did it get, I mean,
It got muddy because
Because
they
we
don't want to put
discussed it.
principals on there, but a principal is a bargaining unit member, so a principal would be on the consent agenda and their identity would be out in advance.
the
So that
only,
muddied it.
the only thing that kind of got muddied after the consent was whether or not it would be a good working relationship between the board and the superintendent, that at the point in which the superintendent makes her final determination, she notifies the board, she's made her final determination for 1 or 10 or how many people are going to be on the monthly consent agenda, and we would have the opportunity to come down here, if we so desire, at some point before she publishes it, and that would be maybe, it would be up to her to decide, well, I can be hardball with these guys and I'll notify them Wednesday night that I'm gonna publish this list on Thursday, and if you wanna come down, everybody has 2 hours on Thursday to come look at, or she can try and, or the superintendent can try to make her decision on a Monday, so the board would have a good week before Friday to inform her. Looked at it, you probably, you got my approval.
But my question that never got answered by anyone at the table was, does the board have a consensus to want to look into some form of viewing this documentation either prior to or post consent agenda? And nobody answered. That's where it's.
I mean, I'm advocating,
So yes or no?
yeah, yes, I mean,
It's that
All
simple.
positions?
yes.
I think the ability should be there. I personally do not have any desire to look at every single
Right.
person that gets hired.
But the ability
However,
should
the
be there.
ability should be there, right?
And that's all the point I was making.
Yes.
What's that?
That the ability should be there, whether the individual board members do it or not.
Exercise it or not.
Right, exactly.
It could be electronically, as Dan proposed. It could be someone staying here late to let board members in. I mean, that's something that we would have to resolve later.
My only opposition to it is the protection of the identities.
Right.
Yep.
But let's get through
We-
one issue first. Let's just get through.
Well, that's a big part of it, because
Absolutely.
if we are able to freely share whose information it is, then I'm dead set against it. That's a very important aspect of it for me.
So
Because you have the potential to mess
So
with somebody's life.
you're never gonna vote to go into executive session again, are you? Because you're clearly
In executive
don't-
session, everything that happens there
Because
stays there.
you may not trust
Right.
whatever's said in executive session, that I'm going to go
But-
out an
let's-
hour from now and say.
But it's not an Andy
Let's-
thing, it's a board
Carl,
thing.
I got
We're
you.
talking about creating a process, a standard work of how to do things.
Can we,
Yeah, I agree with
for the consent agenda, can we agree that bargaining unit positions will be part of the consent agenda unless the candidate notifies the superintendent prior to the board meeting in which they would be appointed that they would like their name withheld from the consent agenda and done in executive session? I mean, if they say that they haven't told their superintendent, they haven't told their
That's-
building
that's a fair-
principal,
that's fair.
they don't want people to know, they can notify it before we do the agenda that they want that held in executive session, and their name won't be out there and that type of thing.
All hires or just?
I think that's a right anybody
That's a
should
right,
have.
that's the right the person should have, though.
Absolutely.
What are you gonna do? You're gonna have maybe some night 60 people who wanna go into executive session and hear us discuss nothing, maybe something. But now you're gonna let everyone, before we can vote on that consent agenda, have that opportunity. So
But
that would be,
but like the bargaining unit contracts, like they can, what if they all, or, I'm sorry, the non-affiliated contracts, if they all said they want it in open session, then we have to sit there and do it all in open session. I mean, this is just the reverse of that situation where they would all want it in executive session.
Let's take non-certified bargaining unit people.
New hires or renewals?
So 1579.
All right, non-certified bargaining unit renewals. Consent agenda?
Not, which
As
are
a
like
bulk.
Paris?
What's that?
agenda? That would be Paris?
That would be custodians, paras, secretaries, nurses, anybody that is a non-certified bargaining unit renewal that has to be renewed for some reason. Consent agenda?
Yes,
Would we want to see the information in advance? There already are employees.
yes.
You want to see the information on somebody you already
I have
have?
the right to, yes, and we have the right to look at their,
You know, how does that not become evaluatory of our current
Right.
employees
Ah,
when you're looking
Christ.
through their stuff? I
You have a
mean,
right to look at it afterwards.
I would delegate that to the superintendent. To me,
Yeah.
that
Non-certified renewal.
Yeah, I agree.
Do we want consent agenda?
yes. I mean, go down the line.
I'm just,
No.
Can I just throw in a little wrinkle to the non-certified?
no. I'm trying to get something
I just
accomplished,
wanna
we're not
raise
getting
the
anywhere.
point though, that we're all, for the non-certified that are within collective bargaining units, their terms and conditions of employment are all governed by that collective bargaining agreement. So you're not non-renewing their employment every year, because they have just cause protection built into those contracts. So you don't have to non-renew them every year, they don't have to be placed on the consent agenda, because the collective bargaining agreement controls. So you can avoid doing this all together respectively. And it may
Right.
save you a lot of
Okay.
that's
headache
what I
over
vote.
the issue.
That's
The
what I vote for.
certified renewal doesn't have to be done.
Okay,
In bargaining
Oh, the
units, for
superintendent.
those that are in collective
I'm
bargaining.
talking about bargaining unit employees only right now.
Yes.
I know that.
No, I was answering her.
Oh.
I was just yelling through you to get there.
so all bargaining unit,
Nope,
Wait,
no,
let's just,
non-certified.
1579
We're talking
renewals.
about, right,
only the
we're
non-certified.
talking about the non-certified
Okay.
right now, right?
Yep.
Non-certified,
No consent.
non-certified new hires. Now, keeping in mind,
Current employees.
what's that?
Because what I understood you're saying is that you're taking your current employees
What, you have a para,
and you're doing the renewal every
but you
year.
have a para and you have, and this is an example, you believe you have a reduction in need. So paras are released on June 30th.
Right,
You find out in September or mid-August that you have 20 new kids coming to the district. You need to hire someone that you just released because
but
of
there's a recall
seniority.
provision
Because
within your collective bargaining
Yes.
agreement, and the superintendent or the administration can just look at the recall provision, and then based on the language of that recall provision, can determine who is the person that should be coming back.
Okay, but those
It's not
positions
something-
have always gone on our consent agenda for board approval.
Right.
Because it's a rehire.
Well, it's not really a rehire because they're
It's a
on the-
recall.
It's a recall,
Right.
so it's different from a rehire, that's technically different.
Is it a consent agenda?
Because let's say if your recall period is only for 1 year,
Yep.
and then you look to recall after that year is over, then you can rehire because your recall period is only for 1 year, so you aren't bound to look at the employees that are on that recall list.
Because within the year, you gotta start looking at seniority, I'm assuming, correct?
Yes.
Well, it depends how, right, some recall provisions are only based on seniority, others are based on qualifications and skill requisite for the position.
Right.
So
Yeah.
consent is not,
Within their job, right, or whatever.
Yeah,
so you don't need it, it does not need to be on the consent agenda.
it does not.
but I mean, I assume everyone bargaining or non-bargaining unit, everyone works on a one-year contract though, right?
No, not bargaining units.
A teacher has an
3 years.
indefinite, what?
After 3 years, they
Teachers
qualify
are
under
part of the
1 year.
statutory
Right.
process,
Okay.
but you're not.
But each, I mean, the contract's the contract collectively, but each individual,
No.
you're-
No, I
you're-
signed
they-
off on a, whatchamacallit, salary agreement.
and so so everyone who's on that list on June 30th of that 3-year bargaining agreement has a 3-year contract.
No.
No, no.
If you're, you have to distinguish, take a non-certified employee, which Jessica's been
Okay.
described. Those employees essentially, they have, once they make it past probation, their union contract, they're entitled to remain employed unless they are terminated for just cause. So they don't, there may be a 3-year bargaining unit contract, but that just means we know the salaries for 3 years and the related terms. It doesn't mean that they have to be reappointed every year or every 3 years. They have rights, you could have a
Okay.
20-year contract, wouldn't matter, they have rights to be, remain employed unless they're terminated for just cause or reduced for the reduction in force provision. That's for non-certified. For your certified teachers, you can hire me as a brand new teacher. I'm non-tenured. I'm entitled to be renewed. I'm entitled to employment year to year unless the superintendent brings before an action before the board to non-renew me in accordance with the statute.
And there's a lot that you have to make sure you do.
Or it could be a
Oh, yeah.
reduction
Right,
in force.
correctly.
It could be,
Correct. Correct.
okay, non-certified new hires. We've never seen this person. We don't know this person. We're gonna hire this person. Consent agenda?
Let's go around the line.
I just asked.
Non-certified bargaining unit? Or-
Non-certified bargaining unit. We're only doing bargaining unit right now.
Okay.
Just go around to get everything.
I'll start.
You start.
Consent.
No consent agenda for a new hire?
Rely on the
Consent.
superintendent's decision.
I'm gonna say with what we have, consent.
John, I didn't hear.
Consent.
Okay.
Consent agenda.
I delegated to share
To the superintendent.
to the superintendent.
Consent, but they should have the option to have their name withheld.
Delegate.
Are
No
you looking
consent?
at me? I can't tell you.
Yes, I'm looking at you.
you. No.
No consent agenda? All right. You?
Either be involved in the whole hiring process or we're not involved.
What was the vote?
It was 6-4.
No. One, two.
He said no. He said no. She said no.
You said
She
consent then?
Well, I just leave them the way they are on the consent agenda. For the non-certified new hires, they pass through on the consent agenda now? That's the way it's always been done. For a new hire, for a para or a custodian or secretary or,
Yeah,
But
hire,
it's the
retire, it's all
practice.
part of the consent agenda.
what's that?
So it becomes
The
public record.
paperwork, I look at it
Well-
all one piece.
Yeah.
Because it's not the way we used to do it. If each board member can go in and look at it and then ask questions and pick
Well,
apart this person.
all we determined was consent or non-consent.
Correct.
So it's 6-4.
Yes.
That's that issue resolved. Now, you want to talk about whether or not we go in or not, that's another issue. But we've done that issue.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
But I mean, hey, let's just move on. I'm
I'm sorry.
okay.
Certified
Yeah,
new
really.
hire.
What?
Certified new hire.
Does that mean teachers?
That's a teacher and an admin. All right, we'll do teachers.
Can we
We gotta-
separate
yeah,
them?
gotta be
We'll do
separate.
teachers, TEA. New hire.
Teachers.
Consent.
John?
Consent.
Keep it current, consent.
Consent agenda.
I would delegate that as well.
Consent with the option still.
No consent. 6-4, right?
Yeah.
It's like the Supreme Court here.
All right.
Who's the swing vote? You're on the liberal side, by the way. For a
All right.
change.
Admin,
You may not like that.
admin new hire.
What's an admin?
Administrator.
Administrator.
Oh, okay. Administrator.
Okay.
Oh, well, I'm not.
Is that any district-wide position you're
This
considering?
is a bargaining unit administrator.
Right, so
Okay,
it's-
that's-
Bargaining unit.
Bargaining unit
Assistant.
administrator. We're only doing bargaining.
Right.
So what is that, principals?
Principal, vice principal, director of secondary ed, director of
CIATs.
guidance, CIATs,
Okay, okay, you can stop there.
director of special ed.
Okay.
But my recommendation with the interviews was only building level or higher, so I would like it only to be consent building level or higher. So I don't know how you expect to vote on this. Like an AP, I have no again, an AP, I don't
You don't
wanna-
care.
I don't for that. If I'm not going
Okay.
to be in the interview process, I don't care. So I only want to interview principals and above. So however you want
In
to
district-wide?
record that vote.
District-wide positions, director of secondary ed,
Yeah,
director
things
of
like that.
special ed.
And
What-
building,
All right,
But,
the head building
Admin.
administrator.
but why don't we do, but you put
Sorry,
it on
Yes,
as
sir.
administrators, period, in the administrative bargaining unit. That was what you wanted us to.
That's
Yes.
what you want, but he's proposing something.
He's proposing to tier it
Right.
and to have the APs as one, handled one way, principals and district-wide handled a different way.
How many APs we have?
One.
Right now we have
Assistant.
You'd be.
8, including the elementary.
And the
Oh, yeah,
CIATs.
including each other.
Yep, 5 elementary.
Is
Well,
the CIAT a district-wide or is
That's a
that?
district.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a
3 of them.
So there are 8 APs. Consent
Right,
agenda?
right now.
Okay,
The
then, so,
AP assistant principal positions. Chris, you're starting to be a pain in the ass. You just want-
so we're gonna.
Everyone gets a turn.
So
Counselor.
what?
I know.
So this vote is going to be whether or not to start. We're gonna go around and we're gonna determine if we wanna differentiate, first of all, between a hierarchy or all administrators in general.
That wasn't what I asked.
So,
I
well,
asked
you
you if you want,
originally,
I just asked if you want to do assistant principals, consent agenda, or not.
well, he threw them in after you originally wanted us just to take.
Right, so he changed his mind. So let's vote on what he's proposing.
You want
Well-
to finish the first one?
Yeah, I wanna
Okay.
have the board.
All
Let's just-
administrators.
Yes.
No.
in front of the whole board separately, as
So
opposed to
it's
the
a no.
consent
So
agenda.
you want a no consent agenda?
No
No.
consent
All right.
agenda.
No.
I'd go for the tiered system.
That's not the question. Consent agenda for
No.
all, or, thank you. Okay,
No.
all right, we can stop. All right, assistant principals on the consent agenda. No.
Consent.
No.
Consent.
No.
No.
I'm not.
I was gonna vote yes.
Were you? Okay, so we have 3 yeses on that.
So the
All right,
board.
so the board wants to see a separate process for all administrators. You want all administrators to come before the board as a separate vote.
Is that what you wanted?
Oh, that's not what I want.
That's exactly how Napoleon came to.
Well, if they're not on the consent agenda, they have to go somewhere.
Revolutionary government in France failed. Napoleon recreated it.
So if they're not on the consent agenda, that means the superintendent hires.
No.
No, it appears on
Yeah.
the minutes as appointment of such and such as part of
Do we
the
want to
agenda,
keep it
right?
as a separate
Yeah,
action
it's an
item?
agenda item.
Right.
As a separate action agenda
Yeah,
item?
yeah.
Okay. So all administrators will come before the board, before the board to be approved or disapproved.
I'm
That's-
just talking about AP,
That's,
Okay.
not all administrators.
Okay.
I'm back to AP.
no, that was.
AP is not gonna be on the consent agenda, that was the decision.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so if the AP is not, positions are not on the consent agenda,
Yeah.
that means that the superintendent hires the AP, and that is just
That's not,
conveyed to the board
No.
at a meeting.
that's not, is that what you want to ask? Because
That's
they
what
can
I'm
be a
asking.
regular action item, they're just not consent, they're a regular action item. Brought as an individual action item, not consent. Open for discussion. Whereas consent's generally not open for discussion.
Or it can be that,
It can be either way. Do
okay,
you want to propose that?
I would like that the superintendent would hire the AP.
Just hire and inform us of her hire. for the
Correct.
AP.
No.
Consent. What's that? Consent.
It's not on the consent, we already decided no
Wanna
consent.
wake up,
You know,
Jeff?
this is, as I was pointing down this is exactly how Napoleon took over after the revolutionary government of France failed ultimately, in this chaos. Okay, what's your question?
The question is, she would like to propose that. the super-
here.
Well,
Ellen would like to propose that the
propose.
superintendent hire the assistant principals and just inform the board.
No, it should be an agenda item. Or put on the consent agenda, but it
Well, it's
should
off
come
the
up.
consent agenda because you said no and everybody else said no.
Well, then-
It's not a consent agenda item
Then why are we
anymore.
voting on it again?
What do you want
Because
on
when
the
we do it,
agenda?
Agenda
We have-
item,
we have to
agenda
put it
item, agenda item, agenda
Okay,
item.
so now.
We're not done. You have to be patient.
Okay.
You start most of this chaos, just
Ah.
wait. Dan, Appointed by the superintendent or not?
Yeah, letter appointed.
So I got
I
one,
just want to be
two, I
clear,
got three
we have to
appointments.
consent to a janitor, but we can appoint an assistant principal.
Right,
That's what we just
correct.
decided.
That's not
We
yet.
don't just
Not yet.
have-
We have,
Well, you haven't taught, you don't know who's more
we
important.
have, we have four that want to just have the superintendent appointed.
I didn't.
I didn't count you.
Oh, okay.
We've gone around 6 people.
Okay. So it's 4-1.
Yeah, I'd like to, yeah.
Have the superintendent appointed?
Yes.
Listen, I'm in the neighborhood, I don't even know what street I'm on anymore, so I'm gonna just pass on that. I'm so lost now.
Agenda item.
Well, it's 5-4. Agenda item, it lost. It was 4-5, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So it's appointed or agenda?
It's not appointed, appointed lost.
It's
Now
agenda.
Agenda, separate action item. To be recommended by the board, it's recommended by the superintendent and the board votes on it as a separate action item. I'm running out of options.
Okay, yeah,
Wait, if you want to think about it, go ahead.
yes.
You're a yes. Ellen?
What's the question?
Yeah, I'm so lost.
Just say yes.
The question is, the assistant principal is recommended by the superintendent, brought as an action item on the agenda for approval.
Didn't we
We
already
just
just
did
vote
this.
on that?
No, no, we voted on your motion of the
Either having it
sheet, no, there
appointed
wasn't,
or
no,
on
it's
the
one or the other, you
agenda.
can't have, it was
It
yes or no.
lost.
Appointed lost, so now it's agenda.
Right, so doesn't it just become agenda?
Sure, you wanna just make it agenda, is everybody happy with that?
Agenda.
Yeah.
That's
Everybody
what I
knows.
thought it
I
was.
said before.
So now
You're not running the meeting, stop. All right, assistant
I think we've
principals
reached our
are
limit.
on action items, we have a half an hour.
We're gonna have great goals.
We're gonna have 3 more
Yeah,
meetings.
yeah. Principals and district-wide administrators, including all central office bargaining unit administrators.
Can I make a motion?
Sure.
I make a
Make a
motion
suggestion.
that, being that they don't really seem to like the consent aspect, let's do it by line item vote of the board.
Okay.
That's what we did with
Agenda
the
item.
assistant.
Agenda item
Agenda.
under
So by
action.
saying that, we're saying superintendent recommends a person, we approve or disapprove, right?
Yes,
As an action item.
as an
Okay,
action
as a
item, not on the
so
consent
each one.
agenda.
Right.
Got it,
The
So
person's
they
name,
get posted on Friday for the meeting on Wednesday.
got it.
Okay.
I'm just thinking,
Did you
how was this gonna
state your opinion?
It'll work.
Did you vote?
I will only be in favor of it if their name is withheld.
Right.
That isn't what's the.
what do you want to do?
I just, I propose yes.
I only want to vote if the name is withheld.
Agenda item,
Name or no name?
name.
Okay.
Agenda item, no name until the night of the meeting.
Well, it would have to come out at the night of the meeting or we wouldn't know who we were talking about. All right,
But it
3-2.
has to be in a closed sessions.
Carl?
An agenda item with the name unless they've specifically requested that it not go out.
Okay, Chris?
Yes, they're smart.
Boom. Well, that's why you want to have
Two.
your final
Yours?
applicant
Agenda item,
give
no
us
name.
the name
Agenda
a week
item 3.
before you come forth.
Yeah, as an item, no name, I thought we were just giving a legal opinion that if we put a name on there, we could be in trouble.
No.
Okay,
I thought that's what.
No, that's actually exactly what was said.
all right,
Right.
district-wide,
Could, won't, not have.
district-wide and principals, agenda item, no name.
Yeah.
That was what was just approved by a straw poll.
What was it?
Well, we're not really voting, because we can't vote, we're just making a straw poll.
We get to
More
vote
for it
next
than
time.
against it. There's no actual number, because we can't officially take any action, we're just forming an opinion. And our opinion is retired.
Getting a feeling.
Yes. I don't know, who's left? The non-certified, the central office people that have annual contracts, that's just easier. Non-certified, annual, non-bargaining unit people.
For new
Review-
hires?
No, they're a new hire every year. Is how we're gonna handle that. We've just gone the way we're gonna handle all the other units. The only thing left for us to decide now is what we're doing. We're done with that. Hiring and firing was just decided how it was gonna be done. Now we're moving on to the annual contract personnel. The question is, do we want to continue a contract, or do we want to move to an agreement, change our current practice?
So
Do we
non-bargaining
want to
unit.
separate a hierarchy of certain people get a contract, certain people get an annual?
Well, do we
Renewal.
want to first deal with just the issue of consent, action item, or superintendent? Just for these, now, for this group.
We have to decide what it's
That's
gonna
the
be
first thing.
We
And
don't
then-
know what it's gonna be.
Well, if they're contracts, we have to do them, don't we have to do
Yes.
them in executive?
Yes. If they're contracts,
So
we have to.
if we
do them.
decide to stick with contracts, that answers the question.
Yes.
Well, I mean, there
Do we
there was a
want-
more basic issue of whether or not we would delegate the superintendent just to hire those without our consent or approval, which he can do. But we're moving, so that's why I thought the
That's not what
first
you were
part of
asking.
this should be, do we want to first do, have the board consent or action item these positions? Then we can move to the second issue.
The first issue is decide if we wanna give them a contract or not.
I motion that we give them contracts.
Oh, okay.
Keep all the positions? All the positions stay as a contract?
But
All
if
the
you-
existing,
All the current ones that have contracts.
even new hires?
There are no.
It doesn't matter.
Talking
This is your
about future.
roadmap for the future. This
Okay.
isn't about what's currently in place. This is what you're doing for the future.
Right.
So in the future, are we going to issue contracts or are we gonna issue? Sorry.
Work agreements. Fiona's saying contracts.
For the
Okay.
future.
But does the
Contracts,
board
right?
vote on?
Hang on a second, hang on. Right, Fiona? You're saying,
Well, I'm
keep them
saying,
contract
you're
positions
not gonna
forever.
get a person in education to come here at a higher level position without some
Do you want to
deal that they're
differentiate
gonna
out?
have a job for a year.
Do you want to differentiate out like techs and administrative assistants from director's positions, or do you want to just keep them all lumped as one?
I think they should all have a contract.
Her
that a
proposal-
motion?
She wants to keep all of them as
No,
contracts.
she make them, oh no, she can't make them.
No,
Well, I'm just saying,
we're
I
just gonna take a
suggest
straw
that we
poll on
keep
that.
them all
Keep
as
them all as a
contracts to
contract?
make sure we can get people to come and work in our district.
Keep them all as an
All the
annual contract employee?
non-bargaining,
No.
non-certified
That-
employees.
Okay, no.
No, because you've got two certified people in those positions. Never mind.
John, you want to keep them
Well,
under
they're already in
contract,
the
or you
district.
want?
Keep them under
Central
contract, I
office.
agree with Fiona.
Okay, Daniel?
Contracts.
Okay.
Contract.
Contracts.
So they stay as contracted employees. No work agreement. All right. Do we want to review the full contract?
I mean, personally, I would only like to see anything that has a monetary cost to the board. Any relevant changes that have a monetary cost to the board.
I want to see the contract.
I wanna see the contract.
See the contract.
See the contract.
Yep.
I didn't get Chris's nod.
Yeah.
Contracts? All right. So we'll review them annually, full contract renew every year. Set it up.
Can we add to that, is that a time?
Yes, I was just gonna say that,
January,
that the
February?
contracts are to the board no later than April.
March.
March. It should be done with budget.
Yeah, it should be with budget.
Well,
I mean, it doesn't have to be given until June,
What would start till July?
but July.
And what do we do when X, position X leaves the district June 1st? Then we're gonna have a new hire.
Yeah, you hire somebody.
Well,
then
they're
you
not,
gotta-
the contract wouldn't be effective till July 1, and they're not signing it till then.
Well,
The
there
board
is a
has 4
different,
months
I would
to
just
debate
hope,
about it.
I would just hope
Right.
that whatever that position is, you had a 10-year assistant superintendent making 130, now you're gonna get a first-year, any experienced superintendent, and now that's
Not-
one
But the
time.
contract
We're not talking
specifies.
We're
about
not
the
talking about the
superintendent.
superintendent.
Assistant superintendent.
But it specifies.
As an
the person
example,
the
that's what-
contract's for.
Oh, you didn't say assistant,
We're
you said
talking about
You
superintendent.
said super.
You said- no,
non-bargaining,
wait.
non-certified
Wait.
employees.
Andrew.
Oh, okay.
You said superintendent.
No, I said assistant.
No, you said superintendent. There's
Okay.
4 people that heard you say that. That's what got us confused.
Well, I
So we
didn't-
were just
I
trying to
know
correct
that-
it.
Okay.
All right.
But this wouldn't be assistant superintendent.
Okay, so
either.
now,
This is
now we're breaking this
non-bargaining.
down again
No, it
between
wouldn't.
the certified,
It's non-bargaining, non-certified.
So we're
Business
gonna break
manager,
this-
human resources.
No, the
Human
business-
resources certified.
yeah, so,
Just, I didn't say, I said all annual contracts.
that's what you said, which
Right.
would have been the assistant
It would be
superintendent.
everyone lower than the superintendent that's not in a bargaining unit.
Right, so why would I have
Decide we're
said?
reviewing them annually, why are we still talking? We're reviewing
Yeah.
them
Why we're
annually,
still talking about it.
and we're gonna see them every year.
The only
It is.
discussion was we're gonna see them
Earlier.
earlier, March,
Right.
Yeah.
March,
We're gonna see them and then we're gonna vote on them.
yeah.
Well, I mean, you could see them and then not vote on them.
I thought your question is if you had a hire mid-year, what would happen?
Well, that was just, okay, I'm sorry, really getting you guys off. I'm sorry. Where are we now? So we're this group, and we're going to review the contracts, and we're also gonna vote to ultimately hire these people as well. Right?
Renew them. We're
And
not terminating them, we're rehiring them.
Any, if there's a new hire, the contract comes to the board for renewal, acceptance, denial, whatever.
They're-
The contract comes to the
Right,
board,
and a
we
new
accept the
hire,
contract, we
same.
don't accept the contract.
So from here,
Yes,
it needs to come to policy, to form a policy for all these
yes. I'm sure
areas
that
that we
Rich
need to.
and Jessica have kept copious notes as to how this smooth transition happened.
I think they're gonna say, I need tomorrow.
Rich is now regretting that we're using his name in an administrative position. And he's relegating that back to Jessica, who is passed over. All right, to recap, non-certified new hires are going consent agenda. The TEA new hires are going consent agenda. The administrative assistant principals are going to be an action item with their own line.
No name.
That actually
Where's
wasn't brought up till the
policy?
next one. The no name didn't come up until the next one.
What
We
about
could just make
CIAT?
all administrators the same, make all admin.
So it'd be AP, principals, district-wide and central office?
Yeah, everybody in that bargaining unit, we agreed to make them all action items except
Yeah.
on the district-wide, we said withholding the name. Do we want to withhold the name on the assistant principal as well and just have one policy to
Yes.
cover that bargaining
Yes.
unit? Excellent. All administrative positions will be an action item with the name withheld until the night of the meeting.
Okay, I want clarity before we go further, because if it's held until the night of the meeting, then it will go into executive session, that person has to come in, because we're gonna talk about them, so then everybody has to, hear me out, everybody has to meet them, because if it goes public, the press can have it, and boom, it's out there, and then you decide, we don't want that person.
We're gonna put a trap.
Currently, the name is in the agenda. The person gets
But
voted
it's
on.
just consent because it goes through, everybody's consented about, said yes.
Not every
Not
time.
Not
administrative.
every
No.
time, but
Not
I'm just, I really want it clear, the process. Because I'll tell you, it's already hard enough to hire people in this town from outside, okay? We start putting people's names out there as potential candidates.
But we just voted, you're yelling at us
No, I'm
for
not
voting
yelling
to
at
not
you.
put their names out there, and you're yelling you
No,
don't
but
want
you
their
said,
name out there.
But-
you
but-
said the night,
the
the night
ramifications-
of
We
the
have to know
board
the name to
meeting.
vote on it. Right? We have to know the person that we're voting on.
But if,
But Cheryl, are you concerned about having that person come down to a meeting? Is that your concern?
yeah,
Right, but so
They don't
their
have to.
entitlement is, they can say to you, I want it held in open session. You have to notify them that you're going to be meeting about them. They are not entitled to come to executive session, so you can
Unless-
say you're
Only
not
if
welcome
we
to
invite
okay,
executive session.
so
Only
I
if we
have to
invite them.
tell, when I say to somebody, I'm putting your name forward to the board, I have to let them know it's gonna go public.
No.
You have to ask them
They
if
have
they
an
want
option.
it in
Do
executive
they
or
want
open.
The
it
option?
held in
Do they
open
want it?
session?
Right.
Do
If
they
say
want-
do, then that's on them.
If they want it in
Otherwise,
exec.
And they don't even have to show up.
If-
But
if-
you're not
Unless they want
entitled
an
to
open
say,
session.
I'm entitled to go to that executive session, that's
yeah.
your call.
The
They
board
can't tell you
invites,
they wanna be part of the executive
the
session.
board invites who
Right.
they want into executive session. You don't
Exactly.
have to have that person there. But
Right.
if the person
I think
elects
it's,
to have it in
I think it's
public,
important that they have
No.
that option.
Right.
They
Right.
should, they should have the right to
They
hand
don't
it
have
in.
the option to
Why
have
not
it open.
consent agenda
That's
in
right.
executive session?
And just to clarify one thing, if you have that, the board discusses in executive session a particular candidate's appointment to a principalship, for example, and it does not appear to be support for that candidate, then the board would never vote on that person. It would simply,
Right.
it wouldn't go forward. And the superintendent would go back to the drawing board and come forward at some subsequent point. So the person's name, the importance of what I just said is that person's name would not become public ever.
Right, so we're protecting them and us.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Except for
Well,
when you
except
don't
then they're
trust a
gonna sue
board
us
member.
because we didn't hire him for what reason?
no. Don't open that can of worms
Well-
again. It's getting late. No, don't just, you got exactly what you asked for in protecting the person's identity.
Yep.
That's what you were asking for. That's exactly what we agreed to.
Right.
So no one should be frustrated right now. We have exactly what you asked for. The person has the option to have it in open, or we'll hold it in executive if they don't want it in open. We'll decide if we want that candidate. If there's a caucus or a strong opinion that we don't, then we come out of executive and we do not act on that action item. We remove it from the agenda. And it will not have a name on it. It'll just say appointment of assistant superintendent, and it'll be removed from the agenda.